Okay, good morning from New York. Good afternoon to you guys. So we have, I have four thesis students whom are all going to present in a row today, this morning. We're going to start with Gakku, who is working in a project in Los Angeles. Just as a general note, I mean, it's been fascinating working with these guys. You should know that we developed a lot of their projects and ideas in a VR room, actually, with Oculus headsets. So unfortunately, we couldn't do that here for everybody today because it's just way too much effort. But it was an interesting experience, I have to say, being able to deal with the students' works at scale and be able to be in these kind of virtual rooms. So a little bit of silver lining to this COVID debacle. Otherwise, I'm going to let Gakku take over and start the day.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Gakku. It's my big pleasure to talk with all of you today, and I'm happy to see you. I uploaded my presentation on the website. It's called vltreg.com, and I will share my screen as well. And I also have a little bit of the sounds, so please let me know if anything is laggy. But you can go ahead and also open the website if you want.
You can share the link on the chat, probably. That'll make it easier for people, or someone else can do it for you.
That's a good idea. Okay, where is the chat?
Eldina did it, so go ahead, get started.
Thank you. Okay, so just 1 second. Okay. My project is about treatment and fabrication of the artificial organs, proposing the alternative use of the particle accelerator. Decell lab is made from the word decellularization. Decellularization is a process which provides us with a scaffold, structural foundation material for the organs and tissues inside us. So on the left we see the decellularized heart, just the scaffold of the heart. So scaffold is basically a structure that has pores and holes inside, just like on the bottom right images. And further on inside these holes, the cells can be injected and can be grown. My project is about the organ production, the constantly ongoing topic in healthcare. Healthcare is the organ shortage. Donor organ shortage was and is always on the agenda of healthcare. So lack of organs or simply lack of the testing material leads to the very unethical practices, such as experiments and the organs black market. We do print organs today with the bioprinter. Today we can print flat organs like some skin parts, like flat bones and meniscuses and so on, but we do not print today volumetric organs because they are getting destroyed by their own pressure while they are being printed. So that's the question of structure. Particle accelerator is needed for the process of the fabrication to make it attainable. There are 3 ways to accelerate particles: via synchrotron, linear machine, and cyclotron. Formally, first one has a torus shape, second one represents a line, and the third one represents a cylinder. Synchrotron type machine is the latest accelerator type and the most efficient. We use them in many fields. So regarding healthcare, we use them only for 2 reasons: to treat cancer and to do the advanced imaging. Here's the principle of how do we treat cancer with it. It goes through 4 steps. First one is the accelerator itself. Second is the navigating rail, and the third is the aiming beam. And the fourth is the gantry treatment room, where the beam starts bombarding cancerous cells with protons. So I have been in conversations with nanotechnologists and futurists, with Davina Dalian and with Dr. Ian Pearson, and I tried to find a conceptual way how to combine bioprinting with the particle accelerator. So in simple steps, there are 2 theoretical ways of reinforcing the organ structure so that the fabrication goes successfully. The The first way is when the synchrotron serves just as the temporal structure while the organ is being printed. And the second way to do it is to print really firm scaffold initially and then later on to bombard it with particles so that it has pores later. So this is how the above-mentioned circulation looks like with 3 exiting points of accelerator. One goes to the radiation therapy, second goes to bioprinting, and the third goes to the scaffold shooting. I also developed conceptual design of the different technological elements that need to serve that process. Generally, synchrotrons have different scale and are located at different parts of the world. And just like any other industrial architecture, shape is used as just as the embodiment of the technology the building accommodates. My project is located in Inglewood. So on this page, I'm emphasizing the region as the center of the leading space and aircraft industries, as it provides my project with the main service or with the engineering talent, because we can import technology, but importing talent is way more expensive. The second service that my project requires is the close proximity to the airport. And it's located on the cross-section of Crenshaw Boulevard and the Imperial Highway. And it's only 5 minutes away from the Tesla Airport and LAX. Here is the area of Inglewood, which has mainly 4 public spaces. Most of them are either commercial or municipal. The rest of the urban tissue consists of the single-family housing. The typology of hospitals has different variations, and all of them is driven by the efficient circulation of services. But almost all of them are lacking the social spaces. The waiting area is mostly represented as a couple of chairs in the corridor. So here is the aerial view of my project. Public spaces do gradually transit from the intimate areas to the exposed ones, having the volumes wrapped around the program of the park. And here is the site plan. The main body of the project is the interconnected shape and continuous structure, and is very adjacent to the accelerator, which is the bottom right wing. So the intent of the public park area was to provide the users of the hospital with a space full of optional activities and to make people meet people. The architectural components consist of the shapes that represent some circuits to geometrically demonstrate the channeling of the system. So I did create this series of hyperbolic non-Euclidean surfaces that can be continuous and also can be wrapped around the simple solids that do, in my case, accommodate the machines that I need for fabrication. These components also do work structurally with the displacements of only 0.02 centimeters. They can hold their own load, and they can also support in some moments the rest of the structure. And also here is the test of the body part with the displacements of only 0.5 centimeters. So here is how the parts are compiled. The start of the design was a synchrotron shape covered with the Mobius surface, because it represents, just as the above-mentioned components, the inside-out surface. The design followed that logic to stay open and interconnected. The elements provide spatial qualities in between which the park is located. So as I was referring before to the aspect of the waiting room in hospitals, and also their excluded role explain most of the time in the relationship between healthcare architecture and public spaces. I separated the area into the matrix of different zones, and here are the named levels of accessibility, from researchers and scientists that have access to everything, to the friends and family of the patients, and to the public. So I translated it into the space. These zones are exposed to Inglewood gradually. The vehicle access is opened from both of the streets, where the road for the intensive care section, due to the avoidance of using the junction, is located on the northern part. And here is the view of the inner courtyard of the first zone, which is the most enclosed and located in the inner ring of the accelerator. The plan of the research center zone has a classical radial planning and the inner circulation, which goes into the zone 2 of the accessibility. So the concept of the energy distribution starts from the city grid and photovoltaics, which generate the energy for both the thermal cooling of the accelerator through the cooling pipes, which cover the accelerator, and secondly, the distribution of the electricity through the formal panels that are situated throughout the whole building. The room for treatment, as well as the solids that accommodate bioreactors, is adjacent to the accelerator, just as seen on the section, and just as seen here on the close-up of the accelerator body. And now I'm going to share the video. Let me know if the sound is on. Just a moment. Okay. So if some information about the project needs more attention, or if you want me to talk more about some moments, I'd be happy to give it more of a detailed description. And I'm very grateful that you all are with me. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Gakku. Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to start with any comments. I will just say one thing. The project in the last couple of weeks seems to have taken on a very industrial aesthetic, right? It's become much more machinistic than it was. It was always machinistic in its ideas, but it seems to have really celebrated that or pushed that very hard. That's on purpose, I would imagine, right? You wanted this thing to feel very mechanical in the context of Los Angeles in this site. Do you have anything to say about that? About its kind of, sort of
tried to combine both the industrial part of the architecture and also make it like kind of public friendly, and this is why all the surfaces are kind of flipped inside out, and the language goes like this everywhere, from the single small elements to the whole structure.
I mean, one of the things I was fascinated by in this project, while Christy unmutes, I know Christy's about to talk, was the kind of the strange, let's say, I don't know if I can call it symbiosis, or the strange collaging of the landscape elements, which seem to be somewhat desert-like with the project in Los Angeles. It's a very interesting and weird kind of combination. But having said that, Christy, it's all yours.
Well, fantastic presentation. Great place to start. interestingly enough, I don't have a ton of questions, and I think that's to your credit. I'm certainly, like every diploma, we don't solve every issue, but you were really focused and clear about what your agenda was, what your thesis was, and how the relationship of the technology that you wanted to kind of promote could influence and impact an architectural manifestation. And so I think that that's all really beautiful and really clear. Certainly one of my comments did have to do with the kind of industrial aesthetic, the quality of it sort of oscillating back and forth between almost like a water treatment plant that you would sort of drive by. And I always think they're kind of really beautiful, right? So it's certainly when I say industrial, I mean that in like the kind of the beautiful kind, the one that has a sense of wonder, like, wow, like that's what sort of makes our world go round kind of thing. When you drive by and you're just happy it's there and it's happy it's happening. And so I think that that's an interesting take to bring to healthcare, because I have to say, I mean, most of us, when we experience, going for any type of healthcare, like you've indicated, the process of the sort of the waiting room and this sort of antiquated notion of what care looks like is a little bit uncomfortable for most of us. And I for one, would like to know that, my healthcare facilities, particularly the ones that are running at their peak performance and really performing in using technology in advanced ways, that they look and are designed and are thought of as something as efficient as an industrial process, right? And I think that that's an interesting and kind of a brave take, I would say, because I think there's a certain maybe aesthetic that we associate with care. And that the waiting room is often the only place that designers, I think, spend any time to think about how that's received from either people that are coming to visit someone that is having care or someone that's going through the process themselves. So I really thought it seemed really smart and quite intuitive as a way to say, healthcare should run and function like our best technology in industrial centers. And if we thought of hospital and healthcare like we produce cars, then I think there's a chance that maybe those, if we thought of them also, let's just be frank, like a business. Which is in a lot of places, specifically Los Angeles, certainly how they are run. So I think that would be one of my comments. I think the other comment, yeah, this view is kind of great. It's also, I think, quite interesting that you've taken the mass out of the hospital, or out of, it's not quite a hospital, but out of the kind of center, right? It doesn't have that campus quality, those impenetrable masses that you often encounter. In fact, if we were to maybe take a stretch here and sort of say like an architecture of care, an architecture that is working to provide care, it has this kind of embrace quality, right? It offers different ways to encounter it. It presumably offers different ways to kind of enter it. And of course, some of that might just be in its, visually seems accessible. I'm sure it has its levels of security as any hospital or technology center would need. But I thought that was also a really intriguing move that you made, that you really, in a lot of ways, kind of got rid of the material, got rid of the mass of a campus type technology complex and replaced that with thick lines that was hard. It's hard to differentiate which ones are for people, which ones are for cells, which ones are maybe for, they almost seem like those large tubes that were used in banks in the 1980s, that they would sort of suck money from like the cars up into the system, right? There's a ambiguity between what each of those thick lines are doing. And I think that I appreciate that. I guess that partially contributes to the maybe wonder that it would offer to this neighborhood and certainly this region. Maybe just as a final note, it also has a vague reference to the spider at LAX, which I think is quite an icon. And your interest in recognizing that this facility would be, I would presumably, kind of an international facility, and people would come here and or gain some level of treatment from the research that comes out of here. I don't know if that was, you know, accidental or just coincidental, but I thought that that was a nice connection.
I mean, one of the things I really like a lot is honestly, the site selection. I know that site really well. It's actually just maybe half a mile from my office, but it's a great mix of scales of things. And I think the relation to SpaceX and then the relationship to all those little single family bungalows, it navigates that really well. I think that the aesthetic I'm very interested in. So the kind of extrusion is what I'm understanding is what people are seeing as machine-like, that there are all these extruded paths and tubes. And I sent a text and, you know, Sylvia Lavin wrote a piece on the Dim Jim water treatment plant in reference to piping and extrusions, but it definitely has that aesthetic of like a plant, you know, some kind of manufacturing plant, which is, I think, really nice. I think its strongest aspect is the way it brings landscape in and opens up some of these views of the plant. So it's not so monolithic and enclosed. And I think in Silicon Valley, you know, every device, whether it's a Google or Apple device, looks like a piece of medical technology. And if you buy appliances that are designed in California, your kitchen turns out looking like a, you know, organ construction lab because everything has this super clean aesthetic. I mean, I'm thinking of like Foster's Apple headquarters. And I think that it's very fresh that instead of giving it this enclosed machine aesthetic, you crack it open and make it into this kind of bundle of tubes, more like an industrial plant. I actually am much in favor of that as opposed to, you know, similar kinds of facilities that end up being very sterile. And I think that the aesthetic of healthcare design right now is very much about a kind of sci-fi sterility. So everything looks like a kind of a Google speaker or something. And I appreciate the fact that this is kind of unbundled and connected to landscape and, you know, making these big outdoor landscape rooms in the middle of this plant. I think it's a really nice language for the project. So I'm in favor of the treatment plant aesthetic and actually think it makes for a much more civic kind of place and actually much more pleasant place than if you look at the courtyard of the Apple headquarters, for example, which is very similar, but very cold and sterile and also very not popular among the people that work there.
I wonder if I could lay down, maybe even prematurely, another goalpost into the conversation, just so that we don't completely confine ourselves, shall we say, to an assessment of the return of a kind of a modernist mechanism, without at least considering the multiplicity, shall we say, of concerns that need to be factored in to any understanding in the 21st century of how the body and, shall we say, systems of rationality encounter one another. And I mean by that, of course, everything from healthcare to fundamentally anything that really conceives of, shall we even say, you know, well-being and organic life in terms of how rational practice can encounter it. So I wanted to invoke something here, and that is the term of Max Weber, which he referred to everything that had to do with the body, with life, with the flesh, and with the ecstasies that are possible as Faustian. And he always talked about the rationalization of society and always said the ways in which it sequestered and in many ways kicked to the curb the Faustian aspects of existence and exactly what kind of a cost that would incur. Now, when you start a project and you talk about and you invoke the heart, it is impossible simply to remain within a structural shall we say, physical mechanical understanding, because it's the foundation of virtually all human culture. Some way of addressing exactly what human life is in relationship to the heart. And I mean that in all of the romantic senses, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you wanted to start with a colder analysis, you would still have to say that the heart, and as you picked it up, the heart begins with a kind of a structure that one discovers perhaps at the cellular level, at the tissue level, but is also a remarkable muscle, and it works at that level as well as a quite a strange and interesting and singular thing, because it's, as you know when you study the heart, is the structure of the heart with its valves and its ventricles and etc. It's actually a muscularization of a knot, of a hydraulic knot, and its efficiencies and its entire structure. It's an extremely beautiful, in a way, a flow system. Now, there's the hydraulic, and of course, there's the heart's participation in the broader circulatory system of the body, which includes a whole system of valves which permit, for example, the blood to be able to efficiently move both against and with gravity in a way that is not too taxing. On and on. There's also the blood pressure issue, et cetera, and the way that is managed and integrated with, the whole vein and artery system and the elasticities, if you like, which actually create the flow system, if you like, throughout the body. Now, I would say that was just half of the way of where I felt like I really wanted to go here in asking us all to engage this project on a larger sense. And that is to say that the heart is responsible for the pulse. And the rhythmic aspect of the heart and the way in which it punctuates, organizes not only the physical life of the body, but in fact, through things like music and through things like motion and movement, dance, et cetera, the way in which it connects us, if you like, to the external world. And it continues to do it. And that is ultimately, you could also say, it is the foundation of virtually all the arts, if you like, really have to do with ways of, in a way, engaging, modifying, and inventing new forms of structure for the pulse, which is to say the whole, and the breath, of course, that's a whole other thing. But what I want to say is that those things, the pulse, but not also to mention the romantic notion of the heart, is actually not entirely separable from our intuition that the way the heart organizes the temporality of the body is in fact what creates for us an engagement with time, and which actually is the creation of our psychic life and our subjective life. So all of this was essentially to say, what about all of that in terms of the way care is actually being reconceived? And I want to say this, is that based on my experience of late, through my wife, for example, who is currently working with United Health, trying to rethink, if you like, these types of things, it seems to me that there is a very strong tendency in the opposite direction of what we have heard today. And that is to say, and I mean, anyone who reads those great books that have been written by, I forget their names, the ones on dying and the ones on the way in which the body falls apart. These were huge bestsellers 4 years ago, written by medical doctors who, by the way, have become these massive best-selling authors these days for the main reason that they are trying to recover entirely different acknowledgments of what exactly is at stake psychically, if you like, and even aesthetically in the problem of dying, for example, and the problem of care. So I really wanted to say is that this is an opportunity, because these very issues were brought up and they were presented and laid on the table. And the question, of course, is that architecture, I don't think, should necessarily accept the short circuit to a, what would the word be here? I don't mean a commonplace, but I mean to a kind of, what would the word be here? Like a precedent, if you like, within the history of architecture, because I think everything becomes at stake at this. And I just think the invocation of the heart opened a door. Let's not shut it right away.
Thank you, Sanford. We're going to since we're going to try and keep these things in a half-hour slots. It's going to be interesting. You open up so many issues there that it could take us all day to unpack all of that alone. Anyone else want to add any comments as we're running a time constraint here? It seems to me.
In terms of biology and temporality, that's what an hour feels like for a presentation, just so all of our organisms are aligned to it.
Just a quick
No.
Just a quick comment on. I think it's to commend you. It's very the project. Even when I've seen the context, you almost know it's LA's. It responds very well to the specific climate, and of course, this exposed ratio of exposed surface area to volume and the mingling of indoors and outdoors is very specific to the climatic conditions. And without even seeing the context, you just know almost it's the location. So that's good.
Do we still have time?
Yes, Mario, by all means.
But I think we started on a very high note because presentation was outstanding, clarity and quality of the images. I also appreciated the dirty technology of aesthetical choice, which was evidently made, and I'm following Greg's remarks here. I know that there is an aesthetic of medical facilities which goes in the opposite direction, and it is assumed that the patient should find a friendly, down-to-earth environment, which is supposed to be favorable to feelings, etc. But from my, anecdotal experience, when I am in a hospital, the more technology I see, the better I feel. And the bigger and bulkier machines I see around me, the more I feel in good hands. I prefer to see 29 computer screens in an operation theater than a teapot and a pot of flowers on the windowsill, which I've also seen occasionally, and that doesn't reassure me somehow. In this case, I think the core technological component of the design was a particle accelerator. And I have no idea of what that is, except that I have a vague notion that it is circular. It is something round because the particles must accelerate in a circle. And you may remember when I attended the first juries last summer, I had some perplexities due to the fact that I found that there was a certain insistence of some megastructural circular pattern in many projects we have seen. I said, why is this happening? And some of you answered, it's a kind of a tradition of the school. Well, okay, good to know. But in this instance, regardless of the tradition of the school, the circularity of the project is perfectly warranted because a particle accelerator must be circular. And so for once I shall not object. I think it fits in pretty well. So yeah, I think we started with a very good proposition here.
Thank you, Mario. If anyone else has anything to say, I think we'll have a last remark from anyone, or we move on. No? Okay. Thank you, Gakku. Beautiful project. Beautifully done, beautifully executed, and I think Sanford gave you a ton of stuff to continue to think about in terms of that project, which obviously we hadn't had time. We don't have time to necessarily talk about in detail. But terrific. Yuri, I believe, is next.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're in the half-hour slot. And Yuri, are you there in the Czech Republic somewhere? I believe.
Yes, hello.